So we finished off last video making a successful network call to get the user info, right? So we have the data. Now we need to put that data into a UI. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to build this user info screen that you see here. And maybe as you can tell, there's kind of a lot going on this screen. Like initially, like if you're thinking like, ooh, how would I constrain that? How would I build that? I wonder where your mind's going, but we're going to talk about that in this video. We're going to back up and talk about just the strategy of building this view. Because like I alluded to in the previous video, when I had this design, I sat there and kind of brainstormed, a couple different ways to do it for about half hour, 45 minutes. And I would advise you to like plan out your kind of complex screens way in advance before you start coding. So all that being said, let's dive into kind of the nitty gritty of what's going on this view controller and just the strategy of how we're going to build it. I'm going to kind of talk about the big complex like pieces of it, because in the next, I don't know how many videos, 5 to 10 videos, we're going to be building all these small building blocks. And then eventually we're going to put it all back together to create this final view controller. And that's a concept known as composition. It's a really big thing, especially with MVC. Like that's how you avoid the massive view controllers, is you just build a bunch of little building blocks and then put all those building blocks together to create one final object. And the other thing about that, like for example here, like this, where the avatar image view is, the name and the bio, like that's like our header child view controller. And then these two cards, like the public repos and the followers, like that's a reusable view controller. That's just like a card view. And then there's the GitHub since 2014. That's just a label. But how this view controller is actually set up, like just the user info view controller, it's just 3 container views, right? 1 for the header and then 2 for the cards. Just stacked on top of each other. Like that's all that view controller is. But then we populate those container views with the header view controller, the card view controller, right? So it makes it really easy to change the layout of this view controller in the future if you want to like shuffle things around or take a view out. Like, because really you'll see once we build it, like you're dealing with just 3 large puzzle pieces essentially. So shifting those around is really easy. So like I've kind of mentioned, right, we're going to have a header child view controller that's going to contain the avatar, the name, the bio, all that stuff that's at the top. That's going to be its own view controller. So you can kind of maybe get an idea of how we're going to constrain that, right? Like the avatar is going to be in the upper left. We're going to pin the names and the location to that. And then the bio is going to be underneath it. And that's that view controller. And then the card view controllers below it, right? The GitHub one and the follower one, that's the same view controller. We're just shoving in different information, right? Because the UI is the same, right? The layout, all that is the exact same. And then another thing that's reusable is this view right here, like the icon, public repos, and the count of 46. That I believe I called like the GF item info view, but that's its own reusable view that we can pass in the SF symbol, the title, and the count, right? We're passing in 3 pieces of information and it's going to populate that view. And what we did here to set this up is we put that in a stack view. So the public repos and the public GIFs are 2 item info views in a stack view, just side by side. And then we have a button pinned below it. So it's actually a relatively simple layout when you break it down like that. And then the GitHub since July 2014 is really just a label. The only interesting thing about that is that we have to convert the date from what we get back on the server to an actually nicely formatted date. And if you ask any developer that has any experience, date formatting and dealing with dates is always a pain. So that's going to be fun. But anyway, this is just a short, high-level strategy video talking about how we're going to do this. Because like I said, we're going to spend the next 5 to 10 videos actually building all this stuff. So again, to wrap it up in a nutshell, we have our header view controller that contains all the personal information. We have the reusable, it's not called the card view controller, but I'm going to call it that now so you know what I'm talking about. Like that's its own view controller we got to build. And then we got to build the item info view that has the repos and the count and the icon. And then once we're done building all those individual pieces, we're going to put it all together. It'll be fun. Can't wait.